Welcome back to The Breakdown with me, NLW. It's a daily podcast on macro, Bitcoin, and the big picture power shifts remaking our world. What's going on, guys? It is Friday, June 11th, and that means it's time for the Friday Five. Before we get into that, however, if you are enjoying The Breakdown, please go subscribe to it, give it a rating, give it a review, or if you want to dive deeper into the conversation, come join us on the Breakers Discord. You can find a link in the show notes or go to bit.ly/breakdownpod. All right, friends, back with another Friday Five this week. And obviously, we are talking about Bitcoin's new all-time high. It's at 119,000 at the time of recording. Lots to dig into around why it is where it is and what it means going forward. So without any further ado, let's dive in.
Woke up, checked coin market cap, saw the price, said good price. I was on a stream yesterday with Gary Cardone, and it was like 113, and we were celebrating, and I was like, I'm going to wake up, it's going to be like 118, no big deal. It was there. So basically, I'm a profit.
There it is.
Nailed it. Who could have seen a 3 or 4% Bitcoin move coming? The thing is, like, it's a big deal that we're obviously making a new all-time high after ranging for a couple months, but relatively, it's not even a huge move for Bitcoin. Up 6% is really a nice day. But it's nothing crazy. I don't know why people are so shocked. But this is the big first story of the day. Obviously, we can take a look at coin market cap, everything pretty much up here. And then once again, Bitcoin hits new all-time high at 116. We can change that to almost 119. Nearly a billion shorts get liquidated, of course. And Ethereum reclaims 3,000 as BlackRock spot Ethereum ETF, not just 300 million in record daily inflows. So let's talk price action first.
So let's talk about what we can comfortably say that it's not about. And it's pretty clear that this is not some exogenous crypto-specific catalyst, right? No big new statement, no big new announcement. In fact, to the extent that there's been any sort of policy stuff this week, it's been, contentious. So it's clearly not just a crypto-specific phenomenon. I think that it feels like it's connected to a broader sort of risk-on move in markets in general, right? You had NVIDIA touch 4,000 earlier this week, sort of some amount of relative strength in traditional markets, even though there are kind of like, warning signs on the horizon or concerns around, tariff round 18 or whatever coming up in August. But people seem comfortable kind of fading that for now. Generally speaking, there has been a not dramatic, but very clear, slow, steady shift in the sort of broader investor mindset. I think driven by IPOs. You see SPACs coming back. It's just all these things all together are clearly pointing in a particular direction. And, again, we could probably spend, multiple shows getting into exactly the psychology there. But it feels like this is Bitcoin and the rest of crypto coming along and participating in a broader market move that's just pointed now in a more positive direction.
That's interesting because I would have just simply said, clearly there's more buyers than sellers right now, right? I think we had the whale wallets that we know have been selling very transparently online, probably just get tired of selling. They sold what they wanted to sell. We see the treasury company demand. We see the ETF demand, as I showed there. It just seems like there's a lot of people that are slowly entering this market, not coming in with any crazy amounts. And slowly more people that couldn't get in are becoming unlocked, whether their platform eventually opens up or their RIA becomes more crypto friendly. And we just have a lot of buyers. I don't think that's an indefinite thing. I agree it's happening in the right environment. It just feels like there's a hell of a lot more demand than there is supply, at least on Bitcoin and now seemingly on ETH, since we have popular Ethereum treasury companies coming out and a clear turnaround here in inflows on those ETFs.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that maybe taking a step back, there's an argument to be made that Bitcoin has felt low, relatively speaking, relative to all of those forces that you just articulated. And so to some extent, this could be simply explained by catching up with itself, basically. But I will say that I am hearing reports of people's barbers and taxi drivers asking them about Bitcoin treasury companies again and stuff like that.
Wow.
And again, I think that, a couple of successful IPOs, the rest of the market racing into IPOs, it's not full on animal spirits. There's still caution. I think there's still a real hesitance around policy headwinds. But we've now had so many sort of moments of volatility that, 20 to 30 days later have been nothing burgers, that I think that it's allowing people to mostly just orient towards where they want to be, which is bullish and optimistic. And, that combined with all of those forces that you just described, which is sort of structurally pushing demand for Bitcoin and other crypto assets, is leading to this not so slow and steady grind up right now, but like compared to previous cycles, certainly more of a grind up than what we've seen.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily intend to talk about treasury companies, but it has been really interesting. And I have also, in the matter of a month, because this wasn't even on my radar so massively until 2 months ago, of course, right? When Cantor and Tether and they all launched 21. Then we had Nakamoto, obviously, who's almost like a fund of funds for treasury companies. And now they're just everywhere. But now we've got Ethereum treasury companies, and people are starting to talk about it because of stocks like this. This is BMNR. I've showed it quite a few times. This is Tom Lee saying Ethereum is the new Bitcoin. This went up 3,800%. Like Ethereum will never go up 3,800% probably. And a company stating that they're going to buy Ethereum went up 3,800%, but it's now down 73% from the top. I mean, this is alt season insanity, FOMO happening on the stock market in these treasury companies. And of course, this kind of volatility and upside, even if temporary, is going to capture the zeitgeist even of the mainstream. Tom Lee is a
Yeah.
huge. This isn't some random crypto KOL farm animal avatar talking to his audience about a small cap altcoin and seeing it go up, 30x. This is one of the most notable names on Wall Street. I mean, put it this way, our new influencers are pumping the stock market, and they're Donald Trump and Tom Lee.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think that one of the things that's interesting is it is a very powerful combination to have meme coin style investors feel like they can play their games, but with an asset like Bitcoin underneath. And that's sort of what Bitcoin treasury companies are doing for at least some portion of the audience, right? Like they're very clever financial instruments. They have a very strong thesis behind them. Whether you agree with it or not, it's not hard to understand why some people would get excited about it. Basically, all you have to believe for the Bitcoin treasury company phenomenon to be interesting, at least theoretically, is that Bitcoin is going, that Bitcoin is not even close to where it's going to end up right now, right? Like that's the arbitrage event, is that you still know, and that too few people still know where Bitcoin is headed. That's really the entire basis of these Bitcoin treasury companies. Now, tons of details that could, whack you off the face of the planet in terms of how these deals are actually structured and what type of debt you're getting, like a lot of conditionals and contingencies here. However, it's an interesting thesis, right? It has been. So you've got that phenomenon, and it reinforces the sort of centrality of Bitcoin. Everyone's on board now at this point with the idea of Bitcoin as an incredible sort of asset that underlies this. Again, holding aside the sort of the leftovers of previous movements, this is now a mainstream point of view. It has always felt like Ethereum's natural opportunity in this equation was Bitcoin as the store of value, King S of F Mountain kind of asset in this space. And Ethereum represents everything else, right? So if you are just not really paying attention, you're not really caring, and you want exposure to store of value, sound money, crypto, you get Bitcoin. And then if you want exposure to everything else, DeFi and NFTs and everything else, you just buy Ethereum, right? That's actually like yeah, that is a decent approach. Now, Solana really came in and kind of screwed with that narrative for Ethereum, but Solana isn't really available in full bore yet on Wall Street. And so I think Ethereum does have a moment right now where it could, try to really sort of grab that. We represent everything else in crypto space. And I don't know how much this is that versus it's just run over demand from Bitcoin, but it feels natural, I guess, is the point. It's like, it feels coherent to me. It doesn't feel like mania, even if there's questions around some of the underlying structures. Today's episode of The Breakdown is brought to you exclusively by Grayscale. Grayscale is almost certainly a name you know. They've been offering exposure to crypto for over a decade now and offer over 20 different crypto investment products, ranging from single asset to diversified to thematic exposure to crypto and the broader crypto industry. They have long been innovators at the intersection of TradFi and crypto. And one of the benefits for a lot of us is that Grayscale products are available right through your existing brokerage or IRA. Now, of course, investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. For more information and important disclosures, visit grayscale.com. Go to grayscale.com to explore their full suite of crypto investment products and invest in your share of the future.
Pivoting back slightly to macro, Fed minutes show policymakers split on how tariffs might impact inflation. Basically, the Fed and inflation here are second topic. It seems that there's a lot of confusion, even among the Fed governors, as to their belief in how tariffs will impact inflation, of course, and even what the tariffs will be, right? So you have to guess at what the tariffs will be, when they'll happen, if they'll continue to get delayed. But then there's also these fundamental sort of cracks in the facade here with them disagreeing if they're inflationary or not, which then leads to the conversation of when the Fed is likely to cut again if they are.
Yep. But here was the bullish take, I think, which was maybe the predominant view coming off of these minutes. When we just had the Fed decision before, it looked like a pretty split decision, right? There's a lot of, some number of Fed governors had suggested they had increased their anticipated number of cuts, and some, there was still a fair number that thought it was going to be zero this year. Well, what we got with the minutes, and this is an example of, sometimes minutes don't matter at all. Sometimes minutes are actually quite useful. In this case, they were quite useful because what it made it clear is that pretty much everyone in there agrees that holding aside tariffs, it is probably appropriate to cut from where we are now, right? That if there were no tariffs, if that was not part of the conversation, we'd be cutting. Now, how much we'd be cutting is maybe the sort of not so good news that market observers aren't paying as much attention to. There's also a fairly strong sense that it's only a couple of cuts to get us to the neutral rate. However, what was clear is that there is pretty strong consensus that cuts are the next move and that holding aside tariffs, that's the right place to be. It's just that there's this fog of war around the tariffs. And that's really the big disagreement, is just how much to care about, pay attention to, focus on that versus kind of, deal with every other factor. So I think what the market interpreted with that is like, got it. Okay, so the contingency here is tariffs. Beyond that, we're in cut mode, right?
It's interesting because the Fed generally makes their decision by looking back at data. I don't really recall another time in the past where I was paying attention that they were concerned about a theoretical in the future for policy decisions.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's a weird moment for them. I think that, sometimes, especially with the Powell Fed, his tendency, of course, is to go slower than anyone really wants and to sort of be more data driven and hold your horses, right, as a general position. But I think that in this case, it's a lot more understandable that, when he throws up his arms, drops the shrug emoji in the chat and says, God damn, we have no idea what's going to happen with tariffs. Like, it's more credible in this case than it is in some of the other times that he's had a similar posture.
Absolutely. And in a sort of crypto related conversation, we have Elon Musk saying his new political party will support Bitcoin. Fiat is hopeless, but obviously we have the America Party, which is the bigger story, him saying effectively because of the big, beautiful bill and the money printing and the inflation and the fiscal and economic problems it's going to cause, that he wants to launch a no-nonsense third party that actually cares about things like the national debt. And of course, we have Trump pushing back, rages against train wreck. Elon Musk predicts ridiculous America Party will falter. It's a good day when we can reference the New York Post. And here's a long post that's from on Truth Social. So I guess we're unpacking the America Party itself, Trump's reaction, and Musk saying that the America Party will effectively support crypto and Bitcoin.
Look, so when Trump says that third parties don't have a great track record in America, obviously he's just factually correct.
Yes.
The question, though, is whether that is predetermined and whether there are changes that would make that not the case. And boy, if there's ever been a time where it feels like there is an open space, it's now, right? You have both parties who are, whether they acknowledge it or not, in some form of civil war. The Democrats are in, they have to decide whether they're going to go with sort of the full liberal wing, or the full sort of populist AOC, Mamdani kind of part of the party, the Democratic Socialist side of the party, or reconstitute something that's not that. The reason that it's not more of an outright battle is that there's not really anything competing. Like, there's no vision for that party outside of that group right now. But tell you what, as the next sort of cycle comes around, there is going to be a competition for what the core narrative of the Democratic Party should be. Meanwhile, the Republicans and the GOP look super solid, but that's because Trump's still at the helm of it. And Trump has whipped everyone around him. In the vacuum that comes after Trump, there are going to be massive competitions for what the identity of the GOP and Republicans should be. And I'm not drawing any value judgments. I'm not making any predictions about what's going to win. That is just factually the reality. Like Obama at this point, I think, as charismatic as he was, as central to the Democratic Party as he was, there was a vacuum after him, and he's nothing compared to Trump when it comes to the hole that he will leave in his party. So the interesting thing about that is that if there were ever a time when sort of a third party could, if not carve out a big spot for itself, but at least influence those two conversations, that's the right sort of cauldron for that to happen. Secondly, you already have independents, I think, as the most registered party right now. So there is clearly some sort of middle space that Americans are looking towards that's not represented in mainstream political discourse. Third, whatever you think of the man, over time, the aphorism or sort of, conventional wisdom to not fade Elon just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. We're having this conversation in a week when he dropped Grok 4, which is the latest comer to the LLM party that's outperforming everything else on the benchmarks. That doesn't mean it's the best model necessarily, but it certainly is a reflection of the fact that it's very dangerous to just assume buffoonery entirely, right? So, all of those things add up to, when it comes back to our part of the conversation that we care about with Bitcoin and crypto, to the extent that they care about values that are aligned with Bitcoin and crypto, it could be an interesting political force in the coming years.
Yeah, it's hard to unpack how successful they'll be in the future. But the one thing we do know, regardless of the roller coaster that the crypto industry has been on, obviously with Elon Musk, which I would argue is just the crypto industry's emotions and not fact. But the roller coaster we've been on is that he was early to Bitcoin. He understood the meme side. Tesla literally bought Bitcoin and has largely held it. And he's raging against the machine on the issues that are generally most important to Bitcoiners. If you believe that the Fed and the United States government are irresponsible and that we have a uniparty when it comes to money printing, and the belief that we can grow and inflation is effectively part of the economy, then you support this party because that's the singular thing that drove him to create it. I mean, Elon Musk is literally saying, like, inflation, money printing, debt, these are the problems we need solved by a political party. Oh, and by the way, Bitcoin and crypto will be a part of it. I don't know how that doesn't get everybody's kind of motor going.
Yeah. Maybe for some people, it's not full-throated enough, right? It came as a response to a question on Twitter. But I think there's an argument that, of course, we literally plucked some of these principles from Bitcoin Twitter.
Yeah.
is it pretty strong in its own right?
There's no question. People may not like the way the message was delivered, but he's shown it through his actions for years. So I don't think that anybody should really question it. The next story here: mysterious Bitcoin whale moves 8 billion in largest daily transfer of old Bitcoin in history. What a crazy story. I believe that this Bitcoin hasn't moved in 14 years. And it was just 10,000 Bitcoin clips sending these things around. What's going on here?
I don't know, man. This is so crazy. I mean, I think if you're like one of the more fun crypto archaeology stories we've had for some time, so much that was weird about this, the fact that they had it in these 10,000, wallet clips all the way back then is insane and so out of sync with how people were doing things back then. It's so weird. They also, this was a shoot straight from the hip, no test transactions, just like
10,000
fire it off, like the brass, whatever.
I mean, that's like $1.18 billion a clip.
No,
and even if you got, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80,000, $1 billion is still worth the 5 minutes to send a test transaction.
Yeah, right. You'd think
from an old wallet that hasn't been touched. I mean, we're 14 years ago, 2011. Well, I don't know the wallet technology because I was not there, but like his faith that those are
it's a DAT file that sits on your desktop. I mean, the fact that this wallet, they still had access to it that long ago, that's so crazy. Let's put it this way for anyone who's like, it's not that long ago. Do you have a computer in your house from 2018, much less 2011, that you could actually fire up and have it work? Just the actual hardware itself, it's wild.
Wow. Yeah. Incredible. Also, I think there's the underlying part, which is it was done really cheap and fast.
Yeah.
Billions of dollars. Good luck sending billions of dollars from one bank to another and getting that through without any third party middleman flagging your transaction.
He wrote a note to himself, or they wrote a note to themselves about this Bitcoin on their iPhone 4. Anyways, look, I think that there are two really interesting things about this. One is it certainly reinforces the fact that we don't really know who this is or who did this, certainly reinforces the view that pseudonymous that Bitcoin not being fully private still can abstract at a very strong level who's moving these transactions, right? This is the most interesting, like I said, Bitcoin archaeology story we've had for a while, with everyone kind of trying to hone in on things. I know, best guess, I guess crypto Twitter has decided maybe it's Roger Ver, but there's a million reasons why that doesn't make sense too. Like, we just don't know, right? And so I think that to the extent that, there's a lot of project logic around privacy coins and things like that, there's going to be some number of people who look at this and are like, all right, well, do we really, need to go that far, or is this sufficient? So that's one thing that I think was interesting about this from a discourse perspective. The other is this kind of calls into question some of our estimates about how much Bitcoin is lost forever, because there were many calculations of the 2 to 3 million lost BTC that included these wallets. And, now how many more of those wallets are dormant and waiting to wake up? Now, I do think that these were some of the largest unidentified kind of wallets out there, so who knows, maybe it's not a meaningful shift in that, but it does bring up an interesting question about what our assumptions are with the lost Bitcoin.
Yeah, we need to move on to the next stories, but Yago yesterday on this channel said, I asked him the question. I was like, listen, you were there in 2011. How many of these non-Forbes lists, Bitcoin billionaires are just laying dormant around that, of? You kind of said probably 2747's worth. So about, 600, 700, 800 people that aren't on any Forbes list or list of billionaires, of which there's only supposed to be 3,500 in the world, that nobody knows and are just holding these wallets, and they're still around and could move this money at any time. Pretty just wild when you see it.
Yep.
All right. The next story, obviously, is Crypto Week next week, Capital Agenda. It's crypto crunch time for the house. Let's just quickly, I guess, unpack the agenda for Crypto Week, which is coming, where they've basically said this is the time to get things done on Capitol Hill for this industry.
Let's leave this in the realm of the preview, because obviously we'll be talking about it next week. I think that the big takeaway, or the thing that's interesting to me, is that post tax bill, post BBB, Republicans have decided to put this as a core kind of agenda, like to move quickly on. And that's very encouraging. Now, we don't know. The thing that I'll be looking for is what the latest round of objections is, what the battle lines are. Are they going to be old battle lines? Are they going to be new battle lines? Does the market structure sort of bill, look like it has actual momentum, or is it not? Whatever. We kind of have to wait and see next week, but it is very meaningfully on the agenda in not just a lip service kind of way. And I think that is in and of itself a positive sign.
Absolutely. I agree that we should leave this one until next week, because it'll probably be our main topic.
Yeah.
It might be all five topics, depending on how many different things they do.
Right. God willing. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be good news. Well, let's hope we're not discussing how they
either really good or really bad.
Bag, but I think I have confidence that it's going to be at least a net positive. Treasury Department drops case over Ethereum Mixer Tornado Cash. Months after dropping sanctions against Ethereum Coin Mixer Tornado Cash, the U.S. Treasury has agreed to end a related legal battle. How big is this?
It's nothing that new. It's just sort of the final confirmation of this administration backing off what was one of the most concerning aspects of policy last time around, which was sanctioning of Tornado Cash, which had all sorts of implications for self-custody and for, basically the sort of right to transact. I think that the asterisk on this story is that the prosecution of Tornado Cash's, lead developer / founder proceeds apace in New York. And so, we're not out of the woods yet when it comes to our developers liable for the code that they write. And that's the big concern. But it's still a very positive signal that, at least from a broad kind of structural standpoint, we're headed in the right direction.
I totally agree. So listen, I had the Robin Hood story queued up, but we talked about it a lot and actually talked about it last Friday. So I think we'll dig into that one and see where it develops next week. I think we basically covered it all at this moment. Everybody go enjoy a weekend where Bitcoin's trading at $118,000 and Ethereum's pushing to 3,000. I mean, there's nothing bearish here at all. I think it's nothing but tailwinds at the moment.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Thank you, NLW. Give a follow to NLW on X, of course, his YouTube, and most importantly, the breakdown where he covers all of these things on a daily basis in much more depth, even than we do here. Man, have a great weekend. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you back for Macro Monday.
Later.